The initial phase went well, but we must address the supply chain disruptions immediately.
Understood. We must finalize the European transport contracts today.
Natalie Chen adjusted her silver bracelet for the third time that morning. It was a nervous habit she'd picked up during her 4 intense years at Horizon Industries. The bracelet was a gift from her sister Victoria, a small, shining reminder of family during the endless hours she spent navigating the demanding corporate world. At 28, Natalie had climbed the ladder from an entry-level position to become the executive assistant to the most formidable CEO in the city. Julian Foster was a man who commanded respect without ever asking for it. At 36, he had single-handedly transformed his struggling tech company into a global powerhouse. His reputation preceded him in every boardroom: brilliant strategist, tireless worker, and someone who expected nothing less than absolute excellence from everyone around him. But what the business world didn't see was the way his dark brown eyes would soften, almost imperceptibly, when he was genuinely impressed, or how the tension in his shoulders would finally release when a complex problem found its solution. Natalie knew these things because she had spent 4 years studying him, learning to anticipate his needs before he even voiced them, understanding the subtle shifts in his mood that everyone else missed entirely. She had become indispensable to him professionally, but personally, she remained a mystery he never seemed interested in solving. The spring sunlight streamed through the vast glass walls of the 35th floor, illuminating the sleek modern workspace where Natalie was meticulously organizing the materials for Julian's upcoming presentation. Everything had to be perfect. 3 copies of the proposal, color-coded tabs marking the critical sections, backup files loaded onto 2 separate devices, and contingency plans for every technical glitch she could possibly imagine. At exactly 8:45, Julian emerged from his office. His charcoal suit was immaculate, his expression laser-focused. He glanced at the materials she had prepared, and for a fleeting moment, something that might have been approval flickered across his features before disappearing behind his usual professional mask. "The presentation is ready, Mr. Foster," she said. "Board members have confirmed their attendance, except for Mrs. Thornton, who will be joining via conference call from Singapore. Her time zone difference is noted in your briefing document. Excellent work." "Natalie," his voice was smooth, controlled, revealing nothing beyond professional satisfaction. The morning progressed with its usual relentless intensity. There were phone calls from 3 different continents, contract negotiations that required surgical precision with language, and scheduling conflicts that demanded diplomatic genius to resolve. Natalie handled each challenge with the practiced efficiency of a seasoned pro, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her voice remaining calm and confident on every single call. She was the calm in his storm, the anchor in his corporate hurricane. By noon, Natalie had barely managed to take a breath, let alone think about lunch. She slipped into the quiet alcove near the copy room, the one tiny spot in the sprawling office where she could steal a few precious moments of privacy. She pulled out her phone to check on her sister, but before she could even dial, an incoming call lit up her screen. The photo showed a gap-toothed smile and a mess of black hair belonging to her 7-year-old nephew. "Oliver," she answered warmly, her entire demeanor transforming in an instant from professional powerhouse to doting aunt. "Shouldn't you be in class right now? It's lunchtime, Aunt Natalie." The child's voice bubbled with pure, unadulterated excitement. "Mommy said I could call you super quick. You're still coming tonight, right? Promise we would build the spaceship and make chocolate chip cookies and watch the dinosaur movie." Natalie leaned against the wall, a wave of guilt washing over her. Her boss had mentioned earlier that they might need to work late, though he hadn't made it a definite requirement. "Yet, I'm working on it, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft. "Something might come up at the office, but I'm doing everything I can to be there." "But you promised." Oliver's voice suddenly carried the immense weight of childhood disappointment. "You said you'd be free tonight no matter what." Hearing that tiny tremble in his voice sealed it for her. "I know I did, my love, and I always keep my promises. I will be free tonight. We will do everything you want. The spaceship, the cookies, all of it. I promise. Really and truly, really and truly." A giggle came through the moon. A giggle came through the phone. "And I love you to Mars, because that's even farther. You are absolutely right," she laughed. "Now, finish your lunch before recess ends. I'll see you tonight." "Okay, Aunt Natalie, bye." Natalie ended the call with a smile still warming her features. completely unaware that Julian Foster had just rounded the corner during her conversation. He had been heading to the break room for his usual afternoon espresso when he heard her voice, softer, warmer, and more full of life than he had ever heard it before. He stood frozen, hidden from her view, as her words echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't get out of his head. "Now we'll be free tonight, my love." The tenderness in her voice, the unbridled affection, the promise made to someone who clearly held her heart in a way Julian suddenly, desperately wanted for himself. The realization hit him like a physical blow. In 4 years, Natalie had never mentioned a boyfriend, a partner, or anyone who occupied her personal life. She was always available, always dedicated, always choosing work over whatever else might have claimed her time. He had assumed without ever questioning that assumption that she had no one special waiting for her. But clearly he had been profoundly wrong. Julian retreated before she could discover him, his mind churning with emotions he had spent his entire adult life learning to suppress and control. Jealousy, hot and sharp, burned through his chest. It was irrational, unwelcome, and utterly confusing. What right did he have to feel possessive over his assistant? She was an employee, nothing more. Professional, competent, indispensable to his work. But still, just an employee. Yet even as he repeated this to himself, he couldn't ignore the truth that was now staring him in the face. Somewhere during those 4 years, Natalie Chen had become more than just the person who managed his schedule. She had become the steady presence he looked for each morning, the calm voice that centered him during the chaos. The one person whose opinion mattered more than he had ever admitted, even to himself. He returned to his office, closing the door with more force than necessary. His afternoon meetings blurred into a meaningless drone of voices. His legendary focus was completely shattered. Twice his vice president had to repeat questions. 3 times he caught himself staring at nothing, replaying that overheard conversation over and over again in his mind. By 4 o'clock, Julian had made a decision. Told himself it was about the contracts that genuinely needed to be reviewed before tomorrow's critical deadline. But a small, honest part of him, a part he rarely listened to, recognized the lie for what it was. He wasn't ready to release her. He wasn't ready to let her go into another man's arms tonight. Thanks for watching. What do you think Julian will do next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter of this story. See you then. Natalie, could you come in, please? I pressed the intercom button, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. She appeared just moments later, tablet in hand, always ready for whatever task I might assign. Yes, Mr. Foster. The contracts for the Melbourne acquisition need to be reviewed before tomorrow's meeting. I'll need you to stay late tonight to help me work through them. I watched her face carefully, searching for a reaction. I saw it. The moment my words landed, her expression shifted just for a fraction of a second, from professional readiness to something that looked a lot like disappointment. She recovered so quickly, but it was too late. I had already seen it. How late are we discussing, Mr. Foster? Difficult to say with certainty. Perhaps until 9 or 10, I understand. She paused, and I could practically see the gears turning in her mind, running through logistics, through promises she would now have to break. May I make a quick phone call first? Of course she stepped away and I watched her go, a tight knot of jealousy coiling in my chest. I knew I was being unreasonable, selfish even. I was using my position, my authority, to keep her from someone else. Someone who made her voice sound like music. I knew all of this, and yet I couldn't bring myself to take it back, because the alternative, imagining her in someone else's arms, hearing that beautiful laugh with someone else, watching her give her heart to a man who wasn't me. I was discovering that was something I simply could not bear. The office emptied out slowly as evening fell over the city. One by one, my employees packed up their lives and headed home to their families. 2 dinners, to a world that existed beyond the glass walls of Horizon Industries. By 7 o'clock, only 2 of us remained on the 35th floor, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and the quiet hum of computers. Natalie worked with her usual infuriating precision, but I noticed the tension in her shoulders. I saw the way she checked her phone more often than usual. The slight tightness around her mouth that told me she was holding back words she desperately wanted to say. I'd never seen her like this before, and the realization that I was the cause of this discomfort made something twist uncomfortably inside me. The contract spread across the conference table genuinely did need our attention, but my focus kept drifting. It drifted across the polished wood to the woman sitting opposite me. She'd taken her blazer off hours ago, revealing a simple cream blouse that somehow made her look more approachable, more real than the professional armor she usually wore. Her dark hair had started to escape its neat bun, a few stray strands framing her face as she concentrated. "Is something wrong, Natalie?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, surprising us both. She looked up, her brown eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "No, Mr. Foster. Everything is fine. You seem distracted tonight." A heavy pause stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. I had plans that I needed to cancel. It's nothing important. Plans with your love. The words came out sharper than I intended, edged with the raw jealousy I'd been fighting all afternoon. Natalie's eyes widened in genuine shock. "Excuse me?" I felt a hot blush creep up my neck, but I'd already gone too far to retreat now. I happened to overhear your phone conversation earlier, near the copy room." For a long moment, Natalie just stared at me. Her expression shifted through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Surprise, confusion, and then something that looked unnervingly like amusement. Then, to my complete and utter astonishment, she laughed. It wasn't a polite professional chuckle. It was a genuine, warm, musical sound that was so different from the reserved woman I thought I knew. "Mr. Foster, were you eavesdropping on my phone calls?" "Certainly not. I was merely passing by, and you were not exactly quiet, so you heard me talking to Oliver." Natalie's smile softened, taking on a tenderness that made my heart do a completely unexpected flip. Oliver. The name felt foreign, heavy with possibilities I wasn't sure I wanted to explore. "My nephew. He's 7 years old. Tonight was supposed to be our special evening together because my sister Victoria has a double shift at the hospital. I promised Oliver we would build a spaceship from cardboard boxes, bake cookies, and watch his favorite dinosaur documentary. He has been talking about nothing else for 2 weeks." The words landed like a small, quiet bomb in the silent conference room. I sank back in my chair, the tension draining out of me, replaced by a wave of embarrassment so profound I wished the floor would just swallow me whole. A nephew, a 7-year-old nephew who called his aunt his love because children speak with an honesty that adults have long forgotten. "I see," I managed to say, my voice rough. Natalie was watching me with an expression that made me feel both completely exposed and somehow understood. "Mr. Foster, did you think I was talking to a boyfriend?" The thought crossed my mind. "And that is why you suddenly needed me to work late tonight? To keep me from seeing him?" The directness of her question shattered my remaining defenses. This wasn't the deferential, quiet assistant I'd known for 4 years. This was a woman who saw right through my carefully constructed walls, who recognized the ugly jealousy I thought I'd hidden so well, and who seemed almost amused by my transparent, pathetic attempt at interference. I stood up abruptly and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the glittering city lights. My own reflection stared back at me, a man who had built an entire empire, but had forgotten how to be human in the process. "Natalie, I owe you an apology. Actually, I owe Oliver an apology. Yeah. I let my own issues interfere with a promise you made to a child, your own issues." Her voice was closer now. She had stood up too, but she kept a respectful distance. I turned to face her, and for the first time, I didn't hide behind my professional mask. "For years you've worked for me. These 4 years of impeccable performance, of anticipating my every need, of making my impossible schedule somehow function. And in all that time, I never asked you a single personal question. I never wondered what you did when you left this office, who mattered to you, or what made you smile the way you smiled during that phone call. Mr. Foster, I don't understand where this is going. I'm going somewhere I probably shouldn't." I moved closer, close enough to see the tiny flecks of gold in her warm brown eyes. "I'm going to admit that when I thought you had someone special in your life, someone who got to hear that warmth in your voice, I felt something I had absolutely no right to feel." "What did you feel?" Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Jealousy. Raw, irrational jealousy that made me use my position to keep you here with me tonight, instead of letting you go to someone who made you happy." Natalie drew in a sharp breath. I could see her mind racing, processing the implications of my confession. The words hung between us, impossible to take back, changing everything about the careful, professional relationship we had maintained for so long. Why would you be jealous, Mr. Foster? Because somewhere between your first day and today, you stopped being just my assistant. My voice dropped lower, more intimate than I ever intended it to be in this office. You became the person I looked for every single morning, a steady presence that made sense of all the chaos. The one opinion I trusted above all others. And I was too much of a coward to acknowledge it until I thought I was about to lose you to someone else. Her hand went to her bracelet, that nervous little gesture I had noticed 1,000 times before without ever understanding what it meant. What exactly do you want, Mr. Foster? I want to know your favorite color and the book that made you cry. I want to meet Oliver and understand why building cardboard spaceships is so important. I want to take you to dinner and learn about the life you have outside these walls. I want permission to call you by your first name without it feeling like I'm crossing a line. I want a chance to be the reason for that smile. He paused, gathering courage for the most important part. I want to explore whether this connection I feel is something real, something that could grow into more than just professional respect. But only if you feel something too. Only if there's any possibility that you might want the same things. Natalie was silent for so long that Julian began to fear he'd made a terrible mistake. Then she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. I have felt something for you for longer than I care to admit, Mr. Foster, but I never allowed myself to hope because I understood my place. I was the girl who worked her way through community college while supporting her family. You were the brilliant CEO who barely noticed when I entered a room. I noticed. Julian reached out tentatively, taking her hand. I noticed everything about you. I just convinced myself that noticing was inappropriate, that feelings were weaknesses I could not afford. And now I'm tired of being alone in an empire that means nothing if I have no one to share it with. Now I want to try, if you're willing. Natalie squeezed his hand gently. I have conditions. Name them. Shh. First, you let me leave right now to go see Oliver. He's more important than any contract. And if we are going to try this, you need to understand that my family comes first. Julian felt relief wash over him. Agreed. What else? Tomorrow, we talk about boundaries, about how to navigate this professionally, about making sure my career stands on its own merit, regardless of what happens between us personally. Absolutely. And third, Natalie's smile turned playful. You come with me to meet Oliver next week? Because if you're going to be part of my life, you need to understand that spaceship building and cookie baking are essential skills. God, Julian laughed, a genuine sound that felt rusty from disuse. I think I can manage that. Natalie gathered her belongings quickly and Julian walked her to the elevator. As the doors began to close, she looked back at him with an expression of warmth and possibility. Good night, Julian. It was the first time she had used his first name, and the sound of it undid something fundamental inside him. For years of careful distance, of denying what he felt, of convincing himself that emotions were liabilities, all of it crumbled in the face of that single word. Good night, Natalie. Give Oliver my apologies. Tell him his aunt will definitely be there for the next adventure. The elevator doors closed, and Julian stood alone, feeling lighter than he had in years. The contracts could wait. Some things, he was finally learning, mattered more than work. 3 days later, Julian found himself outside a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood he had never visited before. It was nothing like the expensive establishments where he usually conducted business dinners. Natalie had chosen it, insisting he needed to see her world, not just the corporate environment where she played a supporting role in his. She was waiting inside, wearing a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Without her professional armor, she looked younger, more relaxed, achingly beautiful. You found it, she smiled as he approached. Your directions were excellent. This place is charming. It's where my family celebrates birthdays and graduations, she said. The owner, Mrs. Ricci, has known us since I was in high school. Always. Over dinner, they talked in a way they never had before. Julian learned that Natalie's father was a mechanic who taught her to fix cars and her mother was a seamstress. My sister Victoria is a nurse at County General, Natalie explained. Oliver alone, so we all pitch in, making sure Oliver knows he's loved. And you became the one who went into the corporate world. Someone had to. I was better with numbers, so I worked my way through college and somehow ended up as an executive assistant to a CEO who barely knew my first name. I knew your name. Julian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I just didn't let myself use it because using it would have made you real. It would have made this feeling I was trying to ignore impossible to deny. And what feeling was that? That you were the best part of my day. That your smile when you solved a problem mattered more than the solution itself. That I started arriving at the office earlier, just to have a few extra minutes in your presence. The following week, Julian found himself in a modest apartment. Oliver, a whirlwind of energy, opened the door. "Are you Aunt Natalie's boyfriend? You're really tall. Do you like dinosaurs? Can you help us build the spaceship?" Julian looked at Natalie, who was trying not to laugh. "I would love to help with the engine." Oliver grabbed his hand with complete trust. "I have pictures from books. We can figure it out together." Victoria emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She had the same warm eyes as her sister, but carried a world-weary exhaustion. "So you're the famous Mr. Foster. Natalie has told us absolutely nothing about you, which means you must be important." Julian shook her hand, recognizing the protective gaze. I hoped to change that. The evening was unlike anything Julian had ever experienced. They built a spaceship from cardboard boxes and duct tape. They made chocolate chip cookies that were slightly burned, but tasted perfect. They watched a documentary about dinosaurs that Oliver narrated with enthusiastic commentary. As weeks turned into months, Julian discovered parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. Natalie challenged him. She insisted he'd reconnect with people, including his own family. "You have a brother you haven't spoken to in 5 years," she pointed out one evening. "That needs to change. Family matters even when it's complicated." Julian made the call. It was awkward at first, but it opened a door that had been closed for too long. At the office, they maintained careful professionalism, but Julian was changing. He started leaving at reasonable hours, attending company events, and treating his staff like humans instead of resources. He smiled more. 6 months into their relationship, Horizon Industries held its annual gala. Natalie attended as his assistant, as she always had, but this time, everything was different. Julian stood at the podium, delivering his speech. Then he went off script. "Before I close, I want to acknowledge someone who has been instrumental not just to this company's success, but to my own growth. Natalie Chen has been my executive assistant for 4 years. It's demonstrating excellence, integrity, and patience I didn't always deserve." He paused, finding her in the crowd, his eyes locking with hers. "But more importantly, she has become someone I love. Someone who challenges me to be better, who reminds me that success without human connection is just well-organized loneliness. Natalie, would you join me up here?" The room fell silent as she walked to the stage. Julian took her hand. "I know this is unconventional, but I've spent enough of my life hiding behind propriety and missing what matters. Natalie matters. What we have built together matters, and I'm done pretending otherwise." He turned to face her fully, the audience forgotten. "I love you. It's not because you're excellent at your job, though you are. I love you because you see me, the person behind the position, and you love that person anyway. You've taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, that family is everything, and that building cardboard spaceships with a 7-year-old is just as important as closing million-dollar deals." With tears streaming down her smiling face, Natalie said, "I love you too, Julian Foster. Even when you're being impossible, even when you try to hide behind work because feelings scare you." The room erupted in applause as Julian kissed her, a public declaration of a love that was private no more. A year later, they married in a simple ceremony with Oliver as the ring bearer. Julian left his company to his vice president, choosing instead to build a new one with Natalie. A company focused on work-life balance and treating employees like family. He bought a house with a big backyard, perfect for a little boy's frequent visits. For Sunday dinners, for building spaceships, and for living a life where love was the most important business of all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Have you ever wondered if a single, overheard conversation could change your entire life? It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But for Julian, it was the beginning of everything. This is a story about how jealousy, misunderstanding, and a little bit of eavesdropping led to a love that defied all odds. It's a reminder that sometimes the universe has a funny way of pushing us exactly where we need to be, even if the path isn't what we expected. Julian wasn't the kind of guy who believed in fate. He was a creature of habit, a man who found comfort in routine. His days were a predictable rhythm of work, gym, and quiet evenings. He liked his life simple, uncomplicated. Love, That was a complication he'd decided he was better off without. Past heartbreaks had built walls around his heart, walls he thought were impenetrable. He'd convinced himself that a life of comfortable solitude was safer than the unpredictable chaos of falling for someone. Then came Natalie. She wasn't a sudden storm. She was more like a quiet sunrise he hadn't noticed until it was blindingly bright. She worked in the same building, a few floors down. He'd see her in the elevator at the little coffee shop on the corner. She had a laugh that could cut through the dull morning drone, and a smile that seemed to be reserved just for him, even if it was just a polite acknowledgement between colleagues. He found himself timing his coffee breaks to match hers, taking the long way to the lobby just for a chance to see her. But he never said a word. Fear was a powerful anchor, holding him in place. What would he even say? Yet he was just Julian, the quiet guy from accounting. She was Natalie, a vibrant spark of life who was probably already taken, probably wouldn't even be interested. So he admired her from a distance, contenting himself with these small, stolen moments that were both the highlight and the heartache of his day. He'd created a whole story in his head, a safe, one-sided affection where he couldn't get hurt. Oh. One afternoon, everything changed. Julian was heading out for lunch when he saw Natalie in the hallway, her back to him, on her phone. She looked upset, her voice tight with an emotion he couldn't quite place. He should have kept walking, respected her privacy. But he was frozen. He could only hear her side of the conversation, fragmented and emotional. "I can't believe he'd do that," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "After everything. I just feel so foolish. Maybe it's really over." Julian's heart plummeted. Who was he? Her boyfriend, obviously. And he'd hurt her. A wave of something hot and unfamiliar washed over him. Pure, unadulterated jealousy. It was an ugly, possessive feeling, but it was also electrifying. In that moment, he realized his quiet admiration wasn't so quiet after all. It was a deep, roaring fire he'd been trying to suppress. Seeing her pain caused by some faceless he made him want to do something. Anything. His mind raced. Maybe it's really over. Those words echoed. Did that mean she was single? Was this his chance? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The fear he'd lived with for so long was suddenly eclipsed by a new, more powerful emotion. He had to know. For the first time, the fear of missing out was greater than the fear of rejection. Later that week, fueled by a strange mix of courage and desperation, Julian saw Natalie at the coffee shop. She looked tired, a shadow of her usual bright self. This was it. Now or never. He took a deep breath, walked over, and with a voice he barely recognized as his own, he said, "Hi, I'm Julian from accounting. I know this is random, but I couldn't help but notice you seem down lately. Hope you don't mind me saying, but your smile usually brightens up this whole place. I hope everything is okay." Natalie looked up, surprised. A faint blush crept up her cheeks. "Oh, hi, Julian. That's really nice of you to say. It's just been a rough week." And just like that, the door was open. They started talking. Not just polite hellos, but real conversations. He learned that her rough week wasn't about a boyfriend at all. The phone call he'd overheard, she was talking about her favorite character being written off a TV show. She was a huge fan, and the dramatic exit had genuinely upset her. She'd been talking to her sister. Julian felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. His grand, dramatic catalyst was a TV show plot twist. He was so embarrassed he almost confessed everything right there. But as he looked at Natalie, laughing as she explained her nerdy obsession, he realized it didn't matter what had gotten him there. He was here, talking to her, and it was better than anything he could have imagined. His jealousy, born from a complete misunderstanding, had accidentally given him the courage he never knew he had. It had shattered the walls he'd so carefully built. Their coffee meetings became lunch dates. Lunch dates turned into dinners. Julian discovered that Natalie was even more wonderful up close. She was funny, smart, and kind, with a passion for old movies and a surprisingly competitive streak when it came to board games. He showed her his world, the quiet, steady parts of him he thought no one would ever appreciate. And she didn't just appreciate them, she celebrated them. She loved his calm nature, saying it was a peaceful harbor in her sometimes chaotic life. He learned that she had her own fears, her own walls built from past experiences. But together, they found a new kind of safety knot, in isolation, but in vulnerability. They chose to trust each other with their fragile parts, their histories, their hopes. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt and old fears creeping back in. But they always chose to talk it through, to choose connection over the false safety of pulling away. Their love didn't just change them, it had a ripple effect. Their friends saw the joy they brought each other. Their colleagues noticed a new lightness in Julian, a new confidence in Natalie. Their happiness was infectious, a quiet testament to the power of taking a risk. They became that couple, the one people looked at and thought, that's what I want. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. They showed that love isn't about finding a flawless person. It's about choosing to build something beautiful with an imperfect one. And now every morning, Julian still looks for Natalie first thing. It's the first thought he has when he wakes up. He still feels his heart lift when she smiles at him over her coffee cup, a smile that's just for him now. And he still thanks whatever strange fortune, whatever cosmic joke, led him to overhear a phone conversation about a TV show that changed everything. Because sometimes a silly emotion like jealousy can open doors that fear had kept locked shut. Sometimes a ridiculous misunderstanding can lead you straight to the truth. And sometimes, against all logic and despite every obstacle you build for yourself, love finds its way. It transforms not just the two people brave enough to accept it, but everyone they touch, leaving behind a trail of grace that comes from choosing connection over isolation, vulnerability over protection, and love, always, over everything else. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the incredible ways we connect. We'll see you in the next one.